Hello and welcome to the Progression Running Podcast. Today I'll be going through some of the latest running news, debates and hot topics. Also, I'll be having a discussion with a fellow runner on how lockdown has affected their running and their plans for the coming year. First off, some extremely positive news. Parkrun have announced the date for their return, scheduled for Saturday the 5th of June. As someone who went to Parkrun nearly every weekend for the 2 years prior to lockdown, I'm very excited, as are so many other runners. On their official Twitter page, Parkrun said, following the publication of the government's roadmap for exiting lockdown, we are excited to share our plans to restart both junior and 5k parkrun events across England. Like I said before, I'm very excited for the return of parkrun, but after last year's disappointment, it's definitely going to be a cautious excitement. It'll also be interesting to see just how many runners there are at parkrun events, considering how many people have taken up running since the last parkrun took place. I think it'll definitely be a busy one those first few weeks. Also, we're still a long way away from that date, and who knows what could possibly happen next between then and now. Hopefully with that news, we'll also get to see more races taking place in reality rather than virtually as well. I think the novelty of virtual racing is probably wearing a bit thin at this point, and it'd be fair to say that a return for proper racing needs to come sooner rather than later. Another interesting topic unfolding in the running world in recent weeks has been running shoe technology, especially of the Nike variety. Calls for certain shoes to be banned have been growing and growing recently, with athletes running incredible times in the shoes on an almost weekly basis. One of Nike's prototype shoes, the Viperfly, and a pair of Kipchoge's own variant of Next Percent have already been banned by World Athletics, but the controversy hasn't ended there. Lots of people are arguing that a lot of the newest carbon-plated runners and spikes give back more energy than the runner themselves are putting in. The latest shoe, or spike to be exact, to be called into question is, yes you guessed it, a Nike shoe. The Nike Air Zoom Victory, as worn by Coupeteer in his recent indoor mile collegiate record run, and also the Nike Dragonfly worn by Joshua Cheptegei during his 5k world record. But not everyone is against the shoes. Here's running coach Pete Julian's opinion on the subject.
That's what progress looks like. And the tracks are better, the shoes are better, the athletes are better, the coaching is better across the board. The coaches are talking to each other. There's a lot of information out there. The stuff that they do in the weight room, the nutrition. Just things are getting better. And there are some dinosaurs out there that refuse to believe it. They want to just be able to say, oh, it's just the shoes. Well, it's not. It's not. Believe it or not, the athletes are actually getting better.
It's definitely an interesting way of looking at things. But also rather comically, a few of the comments on this video allude to the fact that during the pandemic, drug tests on athletes have been lacking, but that's a whole other subject matter. I do agree with the points that Coach Julian makes to an extent. I think the training and the recovery over the past year have been a lot better than runners would usually get, especially during what would have been an Olympic year last year. But after hearing what some runners have actually said themselves after running in these shoes, I think you have to take their word for it, the fact that a lot of them have actually come out and said that they have felt significant benefits from the shoes and they have probably run faster times than what they would have. I think you would probably take their word for it over somebody who knows a lot about running, obviously, but hasn't actually raced in them themselves. So I think it will be interesting to see whether the shoes do actually get banned before the Olympics. There's been an interesting development in the world of Strava this week, as a new Strava marathon world record has been set. Japanese athlete Yusuke Ogura took top spot with a time of 2 hours 6 minutes and 52 seconds, taking American runner Scott Fobble's crown in the process. While we all know Eliud Kipchoge is the fastest marathon runner of all time, if it's not on Strava, did it really happen? As a Strava user myself, I think it's great to see elite level runners using the app, as it's just so interesting to see how they train, but also mind-bending to see how fast they run during workouts, never mind the races. I think a favourite for a lot of people on Strava, including myself, is the ultra runner Jim Walmsley. For anyone who doesn't know who Jim Walmsley is, he's arguably the greatest ultra runner of all time, which makes for some pretty interesting runs on his Strava. Amongst the 100-mile runs and the 50k world records, there's also some pretty amazing workouts in there too. I remember at the end of, I think it was 2019, he was actually running around 25 miles a day for about 6 weeks straight, which was just incredible to see. I can't imagine how physically demanding that must be, and I don't think there's many other people out there that could possibly even come close to that level of endurance. I also think just being able to follow the runners on an app like Strava makes them seem so much more relatable in the fact that they are just human beings and you do get to see what they do on a day-to-day basis. I think before, when, especially with a lot of the drug scandals that have been going on recently, I think there's definitely been a disconnect between the athletes and the fans. So to actually have this connection now, as well as all the people that have started YouTube and, you know, seeing professional runners like Tim Manolete and all the others that have actually started doing stuff like that recently, it's really refreshing to see. And honestly, I think it can only be good for athletics in the future. Unfortunately, this week, it seems that running has come into the public eye for not so positive reasons. A debate on whether runners should wear face masks when out in busy areas has resurfaced after the idea was seemingly put to bed some months ago. GMB presenter Piers Morgan called runners panting, wheezing show-offs and said he has had problems with runners in his area since before the pandemic, even comparing slower runners to giant snails. Trish Greenhall, who is an Oxford professor, also claims that the virus could be spread through runners breathing heavily in public places and has also called on runners to wear face masks. Personally, I don't particularly enjoy running around a lot of other people anyway, so I tend to avoid any built up areas or areas with a lot of pedestrians or cars or cyclists, so this wouldn't really affect me too much anyway. But I think from my own experience and the experience of other runners, we do tend to try and get out of the way. From at least what I've seen, runners are the ones that always jump out into the road to get around a pedestrian or will stop for somebody else, whereas a lot of walkers or cyclists as well seem to just completely ignore everything that's going on around them and will just continue to walk at you despite you trying your best to get out of the way. So I think the point that Piers Morgan raised is, while it's probably a valid one, that maybe it could spread from runner to walker or runner to other runner. I don't think it's wholly the fault of runners. So to come out with such, I don't want to say offensive, but nasty comments towards runners, especially runners, slower runners, that he seemed to just have something against from the get-go. I don't know if it's out of jealousy or what, but it is very strange to hear from somebody who should be advocating good health on national television rather than just slating people for trying to look after themselves. I think it is even more frustrating when you consider the fact that just under a year ago, the government were urging people to get out and start exercising to improve fitness and try and get the nation to lose weight, and, you know, running's such a great way to do that. And now, you know, if they did bring in this ridiculous idea of runners having to wear face masks, you're just going to see so many people stop running and maybe even stop exercising altogether, with gyms being closed as well. Then what other option is there really? So to suggest that and possibly hinder the health and fitness of so many people in the country is just absolutely ridiculous at such a time. Moving on from that miniature rant, what are the chances that we'll actually see an Olympic Games this summer? After it was postponed from last year to this year, event organisers in Tokyo seem adamant that the Games will go ahead. However, the Japanese public don't seem to hold similar enthusiasm for the Games. Worrying that so many people travelling to the Games will cause a spike in COVID infections. Strangely, Japan have also applied for the Games to be held in Tokyo again in 2032, which seems to suggest that they may not be so confident of the Games going ahead after all. Of course, for athletes around the world, this level of uncertainty is far from ideal, as qualifying for the Olympics isn't exactly straightforward. Over in the United States, races have been taking place for runners to get the chance to run Olympic trials qualifying times for their events, which means if they run a good enough time, they get to race in the Olympic trials. Rather than devastate thousands of athletes who have worked tirelessly over the past 2 years to prepare for the Games, why not, instead of cancelling them completely, have a behind closed doors Olympics in Tokyo, or even anywhere deemed safer? Surely the livelihoods of so many athletes should come before the politics of the Olympics. We have become accustomed to watching all of the sporting events behind closed doors, so if needs be, why shouldn't the Olympics be the same? A huge problem lockdown has created has been the restrictions imposed on running groups. These restrictions have seen many runners become demotivated and too anxious to go out alone. I am now joined by Caitlin Walker, who has first-hand experience with this issue. So, Caitlin, how has lockdown affected your running?
It's been quite difficult. I've really sort of run out of motivation to get running. Just because I really prefer running within a group, and I find it really helpful to have others around me to encourage me. And that's really what keeps me going. My general level of fitness has dropped quite a lot. Just because I've really struggled to sort of run solo, and I think when I've not got the encouragement and support of others with me, I really struggled to do it by myself. So I've dropped off quite a lot. I was running around 3 times a week with my running group before any of this. And really now I'm at the level of I'm trying my hardest to get back into running. And I think I'm sort of at a base level now, whereas I was quite competent before. I'm very much looking forward to getting back to support of others and everything. But overall, it's sort of not been great.
So, once lockdown restrictions have been eased, do you plan on getting back into running again then?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really looking forward to sort of running within a group again, and my running group coming back together, just because I think it's going to be so much better for me personally in my running. Like I said earlier, I really struggle to do it individually, so I think it's quite helpful and it's quite motivating within a group. So I'm really looking forward to meeting up with my friends from running group and running, together collectively again, because I think that's going to be a massive help.
Do you plan on doing any races or anything once they're back?
Yeah, so I did sign up for a Total Warrior before all of this, and that was set to take place in, I think it was June 2020. So I think it was a mix of running and obstacles and sort of overall like general fitness and stamina. And I was really looking forward to that, but unfortunately it got postponed. I quite like doing sort of charitable runs. So, like one local to us is the Wakefield Hospice 10K, and I've done that like the past 2-3 years, and I've really enjoyed doing it. So, I'm really looking forward to taking part in a different range of sort of either charitable event races or other things like that.
Speaking of other races, Parkrun have recently announced that they're going to be coming back in, I think it was June 12th, I believe. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Parkrun's great, just because it's fantastic, to get everyone together, and I think it's because there's such a diverse sort of spectrum of runners, and it's sort of accessible for everyone. I think it's a fantastic thing to go to, and I think you find yourself running your best when you've got all these different people around you, and it's great for the social aspect as well. So I think for a lot of people, including myself, I think we're all looking forward to getting back to it, racing and sort of seeing people that we've not seen for a long time.
You spoke about your running group a bit earlier. Is that something you'd say to other people to try out, or is it something that maybe just benefited you more than it would other people?
I think I definitely recommend it to anyone, because me personally, I've joined a ladies only running group, and I think that's something for me which has benefited me massively. I've never really been a confident runner alone, just because I sort of struggle to keep myself going. Whereas I've found since I've joined this running group, it's so much easier for me to do it with a group of people, because sort of it's everyone's really friendly and encouraging, and it's so much easier to do it when you've got people around you doing it as well. I definitely recommend it, because there's different groups for sort of all levels and accessibility, and I think just having group motivation and meeting new people and sort of having friends around you, it really does help. So I mean, there's plenty out there, so I'd recommend for anyone sort of, even if you're not struggling for motivation, even if you're wanting to challenge yourself, I definitely recommend having a look at a running group to anyone.
Just touching on motivation, what do you think it is that motivates you personally? Do you think it's more the races and wanting to stay fit to try and compete with other people, or is it just basic fitness goals?
I think it's just sort of basic fitness goals, and sort of like mental health wise, because I think it's staying active that really just sort of helps me to stay calm, and everything. So like I really do enjoy the races, and things that I have taken part in, and that I'm looking forward to taking part in again. But running as a whole for me is just sort of a basic fitness, just keeping moving, and keeping sort of my mind clear rather than anything else. And then anything on top of that is probably an added bonus.
What would you say your favourite type of running is? Do you prefer more like shorter races like 5Ks, or maybe, even just a mile race, or do you prefer something longer than that?
So when I was sort of when I was fitter, and running more often, I think my favourite types of like races were maybe the longer races. So personally for me, a longer race would be like a 10K or a bit further than that. However, sort of just in general, my favourite type of running was like sort of steady longer runs, so like 5 or 6 miles, or even beyond that, but more at a steady pace. And I think that for me is just that's what's more enjoyable. I do quite enjoy sort of 5Ks and going for speed and things like that, but I think as a whole, and if I, the sort of running that I'm to do more often, it's the longer, steadier runs. Like I say, I do quite enjoy the faster runs for speed, but really, I prefer going for the distance, really steady, rather than sort of, going for anything really fast paced.
So you spoke about when you were fitter. Then was there anything else you did alongside running to stay fit? Because I know a lot of people like to, maybe do a bit of weight training a bit, or do another sport at the same time. What was it that you did?
So initially when I took up running sort of to lose weight, because I did quite a lot of martial arts when I was younger, and running was sort of something on the side, just to keep, like an overall level of fitness. And when I had to make a weight, I did quite a lot of running in terms of like fat loss and shredding and things like that. However, over the years, I've sort of, as like as I've taken a back seat with martial arts, I think running sort of become like my main sport. That's just something I've sort of naturally progressed onto. I do, however, more recently, sort of in more recent years, I do quite enjoy doing different types of like interval training alongside it. So, anything sort of agile and different, maybe even weights incorporated into it. I've really enjoyed. So I do quite enjoy doing like a range of different exercises, and not just sort of one thing flat out, just like a combination of things. I think it's just sort of like stemming on from my martial arts, because I think that was quite agile and different. So that sort of mix of training is something I've really enjoyed.
Do you think that could have been what helped to motivate you back then as well? It was like you're working towards something else rather than just running.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because I think running wasn't my main thing, and I think running was like sort of a background sport to keep me going and to keep me fit. I definitely think so. Yeah, because within martial arts and within the sport, I was quite competitive. So in order to sort of keep progressing, and keep doing well within competitions, I think it was really important to stay fit. And I think that was a big motivator for me, that for me to personally progress, I had to keep on top of, like on top of my level of fitness, and on top of any progression that I wanted to make individually, or anything I was working towards. Whereas now I think, because I've not got like a main sport anymore, because running's more of like a main goal or a main passion for me now, I've really struggled to keep on top of it. I think it was a lot easier back then when I was working towards a clear goal. However, now when it's just for me, for my own fitness, I think I really struggled.
So you talked about competitiveness then. Do you think having such a competitive spirit has actually been a bit of a hindrance to you as just a hobby jogger?
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of more of a mental battle actually for me. That's something I've always quite really struggled with. And I think because I've always had the mindset of, you've got to continually progress and achieve within other sports, I think that's something that's really not particularly hindered me massively, but I think it has sort of stopped me from reaching any sort of recent goals, because I think I have let things slip within the last lockdown or so, and because obviously I've not kept on top of it, I think getting started again and going from a base level has been really difficult, just because I'm not performing as well as I could do. And I think because I've got the mind of, you've got to be the best at it, and you've got to constantly keep progressing. I think it's been so difficult to start from new again, whereas I don't think it was a problem before, because I was running quite a few times a week and doing other things, so it wasn't sort of coming from like a base level starting again. So I think I'm just gonna have to sort of take a step back, and sort of, I think it's small steps getting back into it rather than anything, and just sort of, like I say, taking a step back and just sort of focusing on the smaller goals and working my way up.
So do you think as you start afresh this time, you'll take a new look at things as, I'm not doing this to be better than everybody else, and I'm not trying to, beat my best times every week, and it becomes more of a, I'm just doing this to make myself better?
Absolutely, that's definitely, that is the goal this time round, because I'm not doing it for anyone else, and I'm not doing it in competition with anyone, or I'm not doing it for a particular speed. I'm doing it for my own good. It's something that I've got to do for me in order to sort of keep a clear head and just keep a base level of fitness to keep me going. I think I will look at it differently this time, like you said, because it's not for anyone else, it's for me personally. So I think that's a view that I'm gonna have to adjust to this time round, rather than anything else, and that is the approach I'm gonna have to take, which is going to be quite hard, but like I say, it's small steps working towards small goals, and then sort of gradually progressing from there.
So as you get back into running, do you think you'd try anything like the Couch to 5K challenge, or?
Yeah, definitely. So I know my running group that I was attending before, sort of host sort of couch to 5Ks and things like that. And I think that's something that, even though I don't think I would necessarily need to do it, I think that's something that I would more than happily do. Just because I think there's going to be many people in a similar situation to me that are going from um a base level trying to work themselves back up again, and I think there'll probably be more people than I realised that that have perhaps maybe let things, like they've not been running as much in lockdown and they're now struggling to get back into it. So I think having people in the same position as me, who are just we're all wanting to achieve the goal of, we're not getting the same times or anything, but we're all wanting to just get back into running at maybe different paces or things like that, but it's just one common goal. And I think it's quite motivating to have people encouraging one another, and you're all going through the same thing really. So I think I'd definitely take one up. I'll just have to see what's about, and different things like that, but I'd absolutely recommend it to anyone. And like I said, I'll be taking it up myself.
And finally, just to finish, is there any advice you give to somebody who's just starting out running?
Yeah, I would probably say to take it slow. I mean, you're never going to be able to just. I know it's quite it's quite demotivating seeing people do these really long fast runs, or these fantastic sort of splits and mile times that you see, but I think you've got to realize that it's probably going to take maybe a little bit longer than than you would like, and you're gonna have setbacks along the way. But I think it's just, you've got to do it for you've got to focus on goals for yourself and sort of different challenges, personal to you. And I think you've just got to, it's an individual journey, and I think you've just got to take it slow and run by run, work yourself up, and just try and stay motivated. I know it's quite difficult, but there are different ways and different means of doing that. So, it's finding what works for you and not comparing yourself to other people.
Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you very much for all you've said today, and I wish you well on your journey to becoming a better runner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Progression Running Podcast. Let us know some of your thoughts on the subjects raised in the comment section. Do you think the new shoes should be banned, and how excited are you for the return of Parkrun? For more running news, tips and videos, head over to progressionrunning.com.